Hello and welcome to episode 32 of the Statesmanship Project. In this episode, we're going to discuss what happens during the fall of an empire. So I was recently watching a video on SGT Report in which he is discussing with a lawyer and a petitioner, and they are discussing how none of the officers within the Biden administration have signed and notarized oaths of office. Having gone through the Living in the Private program over at His Advocates, one of the things you have to do in order to become a State of the Union citizen is request several oaths of office. And after watching their video and seeing what they're pointing out, I can attest that that is in fact the case, because I have several of the same oaths of office through FOIA requests, and they are not signed properly or notarized as they should be. And what we see here is either incompetence or intentional malevolence. Either they intend to mislead you or they are incompetent in what they are doing. And in either case, they are not seeking to perpetuate the success of the empire. And what that means is they don't have anything planned down the road. They have no foresight. And so when you hear people talk about, you got to be careful owning gold or owning silver because they'll come and confiscate it, they're more likely to try to confiscate your bullets because they have not planned far enough ahead in order to have enough ammunition to support their various military or law enforcement endeavors. If you look at how much guns and arms and everything that they are sending over to the Ukraine, and then should they decide to try to engage China with a war, their stockpiles of ammunition will dry up rather quickly. And because this is America, and we have something like 80 million registered gun owners, there's probably, a couple billion rounds of ammunition in private hands. I would think that they would value that more so than gold. And the reality is if they start coming for your gold and you have more bullets than they do, they're not going to be able to get very far. Because we're dealing with something far different than what happened in 1933. In 1933, when they confiscated the gold, people had faith in the government. They believed that the government could help them, that it was there to help them, that it was a legitimate entity in place to protect their interests. Now, people hate the government. Whether or not they think they still have to listen to them is an obstacle yet to be overcome. However, the likelihood that people are going to comply with any request made by a government officer or official is slim to none. And the reality is that these people, these government officials, especially the ones in Washington, are relying on your compliance in order to facilitate their office duties. So you take, for example, something like the IRS. If you file, that's how they get jurisdiction to collect. But if you remove your signature from them through a process that is explained to you with the Living in the Private program, you do not have to pay them anything. You don't owe them anything. And you are removing your election to pay. So one of the signatures that you have to remove. Because after World War II, during World War II, they gave people the opportunity to elect to pay income taxes to help facilitate the war effort. And then after that ended, they basically allowed people to continue to elect to pay income taxes. And now, pretty much it's assumed that you have elected to pay it. So when you fill out your W-2 for an employer, when you fill out your 1040 at the end of the year, or whatever it is, this is you giving authorization to the IRS to take the money from you that you are actually giving them. And then if you don't, they will take, you sign this form, and you sign this form, and you sign this form, and this is why you owe us the money, because you agreed to pay it. And then it becomes a breach of contract. And so if you remove your signature from that contract, which is what you're allowed to do, you're always allowed to remove a signature from a contract, you say, I'm no longer contractually bound to this, and then they lose jurisdiction over you, and then they can't collect against you. And this is the situation that we want to find ourselves in, both consciously and legally, through doing the appropriate paperwork, and then we will have lawful standing. We have to understand the difference between legal and lawful. And once we do this, we will know that we are in the right to not pay them any money, because they do not have any lawful claim against it. And so they say that when Rome fell, the senators were debating the sex of angels. And right now, as the United States Empire is falling, they are debating what a woman is, as there are several men within the administration that are pretending to be women. And so the leaders of this country, I'm putting air quotes that you can't see, are delusional at best and intentionally malicious at worst. And excuse me, what they are attempting to do is loot as much as they can from the empire before it collapses. And so what we're going to see is a continued degradation of the integrity of the United States government, of its military, of its offices, and the intellectual capacity of its office holders. These people will proceed to get dumber and dumber and more easily manipulable. If that's a word, manipulable, or more easily to be manipulated. And as more and more people wake up to this reality, the absurdities that the media and the entertainment industrial complex try to perpetrate against you will have to get more and more grandiose in order to try to keep your attention. Because again, this is how they maintain power over you, is by captivating and capturing your attention. And if you do not give them your attention, they have no power over you. And so what we will see is a continued degradation and falling apart of the empire. And services will, at best, revert to a local level, at worst, completely deteriorate. And so we want to be prepared for that and understand that it's not something that we can necessarily prevent from happening, but what we can do is establish systems that work in parallel to theirs so that when their systems collapse, ours can take over in a lawful framework, in a lawful way, that we can reestablish a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. These are the ideas that we must maintain, because at the end of the day, what we have to have is citizens with a capital C who take responsibility for themselves and their family, and their friends, and their communities. And from there we can establish a lawful organizational structure for how we want society to move forward. I think tomorrow I will get into how they frame us in with the financial system. It'll be too long for me to get into right now on account of the fact that I try to keep these videos short. And sometimes I feel like I trail off at the end of these, so I want to bring it back to my original point, which is that we're not at the end of the Republic. The Republic died at probably the establishment of the Federal Reserve. And what we are in now is the end of the empire. And maybe we'll be able to revert back to a republic, but the likelihood that it is as large as the current empire is impossible. The likelihood that it is as big as the original republic is unlikely. But what we might have is localities and municipalities that are able to establish their own government, their own governance, and have it actually work for the people within that geographic jurisdiction. And this is what we should aim for. Sovereign individuals who are capable of governing themselves that can then lead their communities to success. Hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them below. And until next time, have a good day.